Hi, this is Paul Palmer and Natasha. Hello, Natasha.
Hi. Hey, Paul.
So,
What are
Natasha,
we talking about today?
I thought we'd continue the conversation about culture and the way that it impacts the pharmaceutical supply chain. So, one of the things that I've been talking to one of my colleagues about recently was the difficulty of ensuring that the supply chain is maintained and that you've got the level of understanding at the source that you would have when you got to the destination. So, for example, you're buying your product from a developing country, an emerging market, say, and you want to then supply it into the Western industrial countries. Say you're going from India to the UK, India to Europe, China to America, something along those lines. So you're going from a developing emerging market to an established market. And when you're doing the negotiations and you're doing the deal, you're looking at the finances, but you're not looking at the way the businesses operate. So then when you're actually working with them and you need to work together, the supply chain people, the quality guys, the people that are dealing with them on the ordering, they have the difficulty of working with a different culture. They have a different mindset to the way that they're doing things. And they might be solving a problem, but not realizing that it's something that you've got to update in the registration, in the license, before they can actually deal with it. And from the perspective of the supply chain, from the commercial aspects, they might be saying, well, we've got to write off these leaflets because it's expired because there's a regulatory update. But then the commercial team don't work closely with the quality team or the regulatory team. And they're telling them, oh, no, you've got to use them up first. But they don't come back then and question with the quality team because they're seeing that they're doing as they're told. But they get different messages because they're talking in parallel, not together. So I thought we'd actually have a discussion about the way that the culture within different countries impact the way that the relationships can break down, or the way that the understanding fails because of the cultural differences. Is that something? Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. So few people really understand culture. Culture is thrown around as the excuse for why problems are happening or why organizations are having difficulty getting their people to get stuff done. And most people think, well, culture is, the way we do things around here. And it's so much more than that. It's about that internal, what's happening in the heart, what's happening in the mind, what's happening in the habits of people. And everything you've just talked about, Paul, relates to people. It doesn't relate to systems and processes. It relates to how people make those systems and processes work. And these disconnects about what's important, what needs to get done first, second, third, and how that impacts, as you're talking about the supply chains and what moves through and what doesn't, is all impacted by how people think about those processes and those products.
Yeah, and then if we think about the impact, we've got a big change coming up, and we come to Brexit at the end of the year, and to be able to actually supply into the market, the content on the packaging is going to have to change. Now, if we're here on the regulatory and quality side saying, right, on this date, the packaging needs to be different to be able to release it. So that's the 1st of January. But the supply chain is saying, well, if we don't put this amount of product into the market, then we're going to run out. And we've got the NHS saying we need this product. But we've got negotiations between completely different cultures again, the 27 member states and the UK. Now, they've all got their own perspective on things.
Well, and the UK isn't this sort of, you know, group of folks that all agree. Even in the UK, you've got different cultures. You take an organization, and culture in accounting is different from, say, culture in sales is, say, different from culture in R&D. So you've got to look at these different ways of people connecting and working together and evaluating what the right thing is to be doing and what the right way is to be doing. So, it's like these multiple ways of slicing and dicing culture organizationally, countrywide, and also internationally.
It makes me wonder how we make it work, because there's so much variation.
It's remarkable that we have things working. We are really tolerant and cool as human beings.
Well, it's complicated relationships. It's cultural differences and their impact on the way that the different teams sometimes align and sometimes don't align. And then making them try to align with the supplier where they've also got their teams that sometimes align and sometimes don't align. And then
Well,
you
and
wonder why you get failures in delivery times.
that's the key. It's, not just the person and the other person, not just the department and the other department. It's what I call the invisible space in between that either connects them or where they have conflict. So if you can understand both sides and what's happening in the middle, that's more of a definition of culture.
And you brought up an interesting part to it there with the conflict between them. Because I think the conflict side is probably where it manifests the differences in the culture.
Well, when things are going easily, everybody's kind of on the same page. They're getting the end result.
Yeah.
You don't see the changeability. You don't see the reactions until things get tough. And thereby, you don't see the full culture until you've seen it at the best of times, at the worst of times, and everything in between. That's how you test the resiliency and the reactions and really the depth and breadth of what that culture is about. So you're right on target.
It makes me wonder. It makes me wonder how we ever actually get anywhere with it, to be honest. because when I'm just thinking of an example. So if somebody's sourcing a new biosimilar finished product, they go to see the manufacturer, and their culture is to always say yes. Their cultural conditioning, I suppose, is always say yes, they can deliver whatever. And I've experienced this multiple times in SAP projects, in product manufacturing, in component manufacturing, API manufacturing. They always say yes. We can do that, yes. But then you ask them again the next month, oh, have you done this yet? Oh, no. Can you do it? Yes.
Will you do it? When can
That's
I
the difficult
expect
one.
it?
That's the difficult one, because they'll never give you a timeline.
Yeah.
And you've got to get to the point where you realize that culturally, they're not allowed to say no. They've got a hierarchy within the company, and they've been told by the people above them that they've got to do it because they've got to deliver for this client to be able to get paid. So they've got to say yes, but they've got no ability to do it.
Well, and that goes to what's going on within the organization, what's going on within the individual. I worked with one, I remember this specific incident where exactly what you're talking about. Yes, 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 yes. All right, give me your timeline. Tell me what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and how you're going to schedule all of it. And couldn't get an answer.
Yeah. I think,
And what I realized was there was an inability to actually think about each step in the process and understand timings. And that was the flaw. It wasn't that they didn't want to do it. It was they actually did not have the cognitive capacities to be able to get the job done till
yeah.
I dug deeper.
So there must be a way to deal with it.
There are, and some of that is building awareness for what's happening on the other side, knowing a little bit about what some of those cultural norms are. They're not obvious to us until we run into problems, as you're talking about.
And then it's probably too late.
Yeah, so I like to do small tests
Yeah.
and risk-free tests to see if something's going to happen and if it's going to work well.
Yeah.
And then just gradually increase to see if they can handle it.
That makes
And I like to find people regionally, because I've worked in like 15 or so different countries. I like to find people regionally who can explain those difference in cultural norms. And most people are not cognizant of their own cultural norms, so they can't introduce a stranger to it. I'll give you an example. I had a team, we were in Vegas, and they were European. And the waiter, I took him to like one of the best steakhouses in Vegas. And the waiter was fast, he was efficient, he brought everything, he put down the check. And I looked around the table and they were aghast. And I was like, oh, geez, right, Europeans. They were shocked that the waiter put the check down before they asked for it. They didn't want to tip him because it was like he was rushing us. And in his view, he was fast, he was efficient, he did it well, he did it according to American standards. And then the check was down and we could add to it, we could take our time. The job was done and his signal was enjoy your time and space here. But to them, it was like, oh my gosh, he's rushing us out. How is this happening? And I had to explain that difference.
That sounds like quite an experience.
It was, you know what? It was a little thing. It was a teeny little thing, but
Yeah.
it was a different expectation and culture that would have remained unmentioned if I hadn't noticed their look and if I hadn't connected it to what was going on.
Yeah, and they would have just taken offense at it, wouldn't they?
And they were. And it could have gone completely in a different direction if I wasn't aware and pacing for it and bridging the behaviors and the actions and intentions.
So the lesson is, when you're dealing with somebody in a different culture, get somebody who knows the cultural norms before you start discussing what they're going to supply, how they're going to supply, and when. And then hopefully the business relationship in your supply chain is going to work. Thank you very much, Natasha.
It's been fun, Paul.
Talk to you again soon.